Hi, you guys, and welcome back to another episode of Breakthrough with me, your host, Tess Timmons. Our mission is to inspire the audience to break barriers in their own life so that their dreams and desires come true in reality. Thank you again for watching. This is our 27th episode. I'm glad you're back, and thanks for showing up. In this episode, I'm talking to Jose Torres. You have so many beautiful things about you. Jose is an author. He has been making his own podcast for several years. He also has produced films and is also a teacher. So there's so many conversations to talk about. Thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you, Tess, for inviting me. It's so great to be here.
Yeah.
I'm glad you mentioned the number. It was 27. I'm into numbers. 2 plus 7 is 9, and 9 is my favorite number. Nine is a very special number.
It's the year of 9 right
Yeah.
now.
hmm
Yeah, that's cool.
So
Yeah.
anything that equates to 9 is like a big deal to me.
Okay, cool. This is going to be a great episode. So we met on LinkedIn, which I think is another cool platform, and just looked at each other's profiles. We both make podcasts, and you just approached me saying, "Hey, let's make one together." And I think we both agree it's really beautiful the freedom that we have in being able to create productions on our own right now in 2025. It's pretty amazing.
It is pretty amazing. And it's really because there's so many content creators out there. There's also a lot of inspiration. Like I get plenty of inspiration just from watching other guys who just started off in their bedrooms and now they have like a big production. And I was just mentioning to you before we went on that it used to be where you had gatekeepers to information that you could put out to the world, but now with social media, with YouTube, with Rumble, and all these other platforms, I mean, you can literally grow your audience from 10 to 10 million in a very short amount of time.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. Like, I don't even plug in my actual TV anymore. And I just have a small scale
Yeah.
TV because I just have never really felt like investing in another one. So I watch a lot of stuff off of my laptop or my cell phone, and I tend to gear toward a lot of like YouTube quote unquote shows, but I do watch them a lot for inspiration, whether it's like cooking or fitness or, yeah, I totally agree with you. It makes me feel good too. I'm investing in what I want to see.
In a way, I kind of miss the old days where we would all sit at certain times of the day because I don't think young people realize that there were times of the day where you had to tune in if you wanted to watch certain shows. There
Yeah.
was no streaming. Like if you wanted to see a certain program, you had to be planted in front of that TV screen at a certain time, or you were going to miss it. And then people started using their VCRs to record it, and then along came TiVo and so on. But now with
Right.
streaming, you can just order on demand whatever you want to watch, whenever you want to watch it. And if you're like me, Tess, and I suspect that you are, you probably work a lot, and so you don't really want to be confined to a certain block of time to watch a particular program. You're probably like me, you work your day and you're exhausted, and that's when you sit down and actually watch, or you lay down and you watch something, and then 20 minutes go by and you're out like a light. Am
Yeah,
I correct,
especially
or am I completely off?
you're spot on, especially as a teacher, like on a Friday night, people are like, "You want to go grab a drink?" I'm like, "No, I want to be in my pajamas and watching a Netflix show." Yeah, I've currently been watching Meghan Markle. She's like,
Oh, you're out.
yeah, she's doing a lot of like current day Martha Stewart. Meghan Markle is.
Yeah.
It's like a cooking show or whatever, and I find it
Yeah.
to be just so wholesome and pleasant. Like after a day of teaching teenagers, I'm like, yeah, I just want to watch this woman make a nice cocktail and a quiche, you know?
Yes, I mean, let me tell you. I mean, there's whatever your heart's desire, it's there,
Yeah.
and whatever when you're ready to relax. And some people relax at a lot earlier time than I do. That's for sure.
Are you a
Uh,
night owl?
I'm because I work in. I'm doing so many video edits. I'm preparing for the next day class. See, like for me, like I'm in a completely different place in my career as a teacher,
Hmm.
in that I am so done with the boring ways of doing things as a teacher. For me personally, I'm not talking about for everybody. That I like to produce a lot of content geared towards my class. So a lot of
Yeah.
the stuff, like, yeah, I'm doing it for the textbooks that I'm working on, and yes, I'm doing it because I want to sell something down the road. But I'm gearing it and aiming it towards my students now, and I have enough sense as a teacher to know that what I'm building and what I'm working on is going to be able to be used for a wider group of students and for a much longer duration of time than just that lesson.
Okay, I want to hear more about this. I just want to also explain to the audience that you have a book on Amazon and it's called I Want to Learn English.
Right.
And then last night I was looking at your website on YouTube. I want to learn English as well because you have teaching podcast videos on there.
So I have two main channels for
Mhm.
education. One is it's geared, it's really focused on the book that I want to learn English book and all the subsequent stuff that's coming down the pipe. And
Mhm.
and then the second one is just about just teaching, like what you and I are going to be talking about today. I'm probably going to use part of it towards that channel, and then
Yeah.
later I'd like to interview you just for that channel. So there's two
Mm.
channels, right? But the one that's geared towards the book is faceless. Like you don't really see me, you only hear
Okay.
my. And then the other one where we're talking kind of like what we're doing right now.
Okay, and then the one about your book, you've been teaching for what, over 20 years, and you like when did you publish this book and what made you want to do that? Did you self-publish it? Like let's get into that. That's because I used
Okay.
to work for a literary agent, so publishing I think is really important, and I think that teachers creating financial pathways for themselves is really important as well.
Oh yeah. Okay. So let me tell you this. It's one of my favorite stories to tell. I tell it every time I'm at a conference or whatnot.
Yeah.
And essentially, what happened was I was teaching at it was a community college that had night classes for adult learners. It's very common platform, very common formula where immigrants come into a certain city, and they need to learn English, and they usually sign up to these free English classes in the evenings, right? And so
Hmm.
that's where I started teaching at night, and it was just kind of way for me to supplement my income. But what ended up happening was I became very passionate about it, like I do just my regular day job. And I found that the textbooks that we were working with were inadequate for these learners because we're talking about level one beginners. Like they had zero English. So the books
Yeah.
weren't geared for that. Like there was no
Yeah.
phonics pieces, or at least not very much of it. I mean, they would have little things here and there, but it wasn't targeting them at that linguistic level, at that phonemic level. And so I remember telling my director at the time, can you get us better material? Because this book, these books don't work. They're just not good. They're not. They're just a little above their heads.
Which a lot of the curriculum still today at a lot of schools I've worked at, it's always still a little above their heads or completely lacking interest depending on their age range. It could be like talking talking kind of basic to a high school student and it doesn't encourage them to read. Like we used Fontes and Pinnell at a high school level, but it was turning the high school student away because it didn't have any
It was
relevance.
happening. This was happening. I saw my numbers going lower and lower, and people were just leaving because they couldn't understand it. So
Yeah,
he kind of jokingly, the director of the program, kind of jokingly said, "Well, if you don't like the book, write your own."
yeah,
And he said it in a very jokingly mean, it wasn't like he was being sarcastic or anything. We were just kind of joking around. We had that kind of rapport. But I went home thinking, you know what? Maybe I will write my own book about it. And so I started doing it took several years, Tess. It wasn't like something I just did overnight.
How
Took
many years had you been teaching before writing this book? Like how much time had gone by?
um probably 5 or 6 years into my
Okay.
career.
Hmm.
And I decided that I was going to try different things, like many teachers do. And he said, "Go ahead, experiment, do whatever you want," because they figured, what do they have to lose? And so first thing I did is I read like all the Stephen Krashen I could absorb, and I read all the Noam Chomsky I could absorb, and I try to understand what was happening for these students, and then I started piecing together some lessons and activities, and then over time it took me maybe a good year, maybe a year and
Okay.
a half to figure out what it was I was trying to test for. And so then I went to that same director and I said, "Listen, I think I have it. I have a formula that I think will work, but I need your blessings. I need your okay for me to go forward with this." And I'm had a hypothesis and everything. He said, "Yeah, sure, sounds like a great plan. Go ahead, do it." So I started collecting data. I started working specifically with students, only with the material that I was developing, because I
Hmm.
wanted to see if it worked, right? And after a couple of sessions, I was noticing that the scores were going up. There were students were moving from one level higher, like quicker. And so about a year or two later, he's like, "Hey, whatever it is you're doing, keep doing it because it's working." Like, because all these programs are all government funded, right? And so it's all about funding and it's all about data. And so he was really liking what I was doing. I said, okay, well, I would like to expand this. I would like to include a couple of extra teachers that'll help come on board with me to just teach this. It wasn't a book yet. It was just like it was a binder. I had a binder of this, and it was all in order. And I said, we got to do it like this, and we have to do it in this order because when we come out the other side, the data will show if it really works or not.
So you've scope and sequenced this whole thing. You're building these lessons. How old are the people you're working with? Like you had your night school adults, but how old were the kids?
I didn't, at that time, I was only working with adults. And it wasn't until later when I could prove that the data was all going the right direction. It was all trajectory was really high. In fact, I was able to show so much growth that they were all getting excited about this, right? And then I started using it with my high school students. And it was having the same.
Oh, it's kind of cool to start with the adults because you've got that buy-in so you can like see it and tier it and just really focus on the skill then at that point. That's interesting. Okay.
Well, also, I mean, you could see the results much faster. And if you work in the public school system, it's completely out of your hands. You have no control over anything. And we don't really control the testing for the adults either. It's all like CASA's test or something. And it's all run by the administration. And you have no hand in any of the administration of the exams, of the tests. So you can't touch the data. Right. So the data is what it is. It's legitimate, right? So I remember there was they were having this we were getting ready for. I'm sorry if I blur out. It's because my camera gets out of focus.
Oh.
But we were getting towards we're starting a whole new session, a whole new semester, and so before that we were having you do professional training, that sort of thing, and the boss was like, hey, you want to do a presentation on what you were doing, and share with your information with everybody, and so we did, and this really hit well. So I was even getting people that was in the intermediate levels that were starting to incorporate some of the phonics into their instruction because that was showing everybody, look, you can say what you want about the lessons and the activities that I put together, but you can't argue with the data. The data is outside of my control, right? So we were able to see that you look at this group of students. This group of students worked with my materials. And you look at this group of students that we deliberately did not subject them to any of my material. We just used the same stuff that they had been using for years. And the difference was completely different. I mean, it was just stark difference. Right?
Did you do any filming in your classroom? Is that on your podcast at all so that teachers could see the lesson? Do schools hire you to come and consult and show the other staff members?
Well, yeah, that came a little bit later, but we're still talking about you were asking me how I got to the book part. So once we got to, I did film. In fact, if you look in that channel that I want to learn English channel, if you go back, I'll scroll all the way to the beginning, you'll see be in the classroom with my adult students. There's a couple of them in there. Anyway, but yeah, it took 6 years, ultimately. It took 6 years, and when it was all said and done, the college was completely they were in love with the whole plan. I had taken my data and on all of that I had put together, and I shared it with my colleagues at the Maryland TESOL organization, which at the time the president was one of my former college professors.
Oh.
And as you and I are talking right now, she's actually the president of TESOL International now. So she's moved on all the way up. But she was there at the beginning. And she encouraged me all the way. She's like, submit all this. And the organization gave me a grant, what they called an achievement grant. She says, we want you to publish this. So I self-published it with the intention that the college was going to support me on it. And I went to a conference or two. At that year, I think the TESOL International were having their conference in Baltimore, which is where I live. All the stars were aligning for me, and I said it just makes sense to do it. I'm like, what do I got to lose? I got nothing to lose. I'm just a teacher, and that's how it happened. And then I put out the book using the Amazon platform, and boy, did it take off.
That's cool.
It changed my life.
I think that part too of like, I've got nothing to lose. Like, if I try it and it doesn't work, I'm still back to where I am, which is my safe ground. So why not try it? Because I'm not going to lose out by trying, right? Why did you decide on self-publishing? And I'm surprised that like T Cell doesn't have their own publishing group or company.
Um, I like to have control of what I was doing, and I've already had bad experiences with some of the public, not to knock the publishers that are out there, but they're only set on making money.
And you've
And
already grasped how you wanted it tiered in a certain way. So if I hand it off to an editor, they might want to rearrange things, and you know already the way it
they
is.
might think about this in terms of a series, and they're taking money, and I didn't want it to be a series. There's a reason why, 8 years later, I still have not come out with a second, like a second level. There's only a level one because there's already plenty of stuff out there for level two and on up. I'm not trying to sell you anything. Like if you want to buy the book and use it, I encourage you to use it, and of course I'm very grateful that you do. But I'm not hustling anything. I'm not trying to. I'm not really hustling it. I tell people about it because I obviously believe in it, as, as do people across the country because it works. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
trying to make your job easier in a sense. And yeah, I'll make a few bucks on the side test. I'm not gonna lie, but it's not like I'm trying to become a millionaire over this.
But even if you do, that's awesome too, right? Like it's okay to have that beautiful ability. You put in a lot of work and you're helping a lot of people, right?
For
Like,
sure, but I think I can say this with some level of confidence, and that other teachers can say this, that we didn't really choose this profession because we want to become rich. We know that going into this profession, I mean, if I wanted to make tons of money, I could have stayed in the medical field and I'd be, on my boat somewhere in the Bahamas.
is that what
But
you did before
I was,
teaching?
I was, I was yeah, before I became a teacher, I was working in biomed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
What made you switch to teaching instead?
Um, Too corporate.
Hmm.
The medical world is cutthroat. It's very, very corporate, and it left a really bad taste in my mouth. In the sense that I'm not knocking it. My son is in medical now. He's a nurse. He's
Yeah.
trained as a nurse. He loves it. But for me, I don't like the sight of blood. I don't like being in a surgery, in the OR with the surgeon, and I just didn't. After a while, I just didn't like being around that. Where people go into code blue, and then there's people on the table, and people watching people die in front of you. It happens. It happens, and it's for me. I just couldn't deal with it, Tess. I didn't like it.
Yeah, I think it takes a really thick skin because you're kind of like the goalie in the soccer game, right? If the ball goes past you, it's over. And so I think like EMTs, doctors, they know that they're the line, right? But I also think it's a good idea. I mean, this is my bias, but working in other fields before becoming a teacher, do you think that being in corporate beforehand helped you become a better teacher or helped you to bring professionalism into education?
In a sense that I came to understand who I was, and
Mm.
that, like, I'll share one real quick story. To this day it haunts me. It was a code blue, and a patient went into arrest, and everyone did everything they could. All the doctors in the wing came in, and I mean the room was full, and they were trying to resuscitate this person, and they died, right? And the room had cleared out, and there was this one guy sitting there, and he was the anesthesiologist, right? He was the one
Mm.
administering the anesthesia, and I think he was a part of the reason why that person went under. And he's just sitting there, and he's got his hand on the palm, like in his head, like this. Like you could see the grief, like you could see the heaviness that man was feeling at that moment. He was probably feeling guilty, like it was this person's dead because of me, you know. And just that snapshot, that moment, just killed me. It's like, man, like what does that feel like? Like
Mm.
what that must feel like to be responsible, to feel
Yeah.
responsible. That's when I realized that I care about people, and I care enough that, like, maybe I'm not cut out to be in the medical field, but I can help people in other ways. You know, I'm not. It's very rare. I don't think I've ever had anybody drop in my classroom. I've had some very, very old students, but none of them, thankfully, none of them ever had any issues medical in my classroom. And so I feel like I can help. This is my contribution to society, if you will, my contribution to the world, without feeling the pressure that at any moment somebody could just drop. Does that make any sense?
It's pretty cool that you moved from seeing a man's grief and realizing like, okay, that part of giving to humanity is not really for me, but I'm going to come over to like the beginnings of humanity and help impact that part, like when they're youth or when they're learning a language. What made you like want to help like language speakers in general? Like I'm first generation American. On my father's side, I'm second in our family to go to college. What made you like think I want to help people? I want to help these adults learn English at night. Like, what was that inspiration after leaving medical? That's really interesting to hear your life path.
My mother and my father. My mother didn't speak English, and
Okay.
one of the things that gave her like before she left this world, like I came to visit her and I brought her a copy of my book and I dedicated my book to her. Um, it's when those people would come into my room, to my classes, I would see my mother. I would see my father because they didn't speak English too well. My father ended up learning how to speak English. He's still alive. My mother struggled with it her entire life, and so I see those people coming in and I see my mother. I see somebody's mother, somebody's father, somebody's brother. You know what I mean? And so,
Where did they move here from? Like, what's their story? Like,
so my father's from Mexico, and my mother was born in Texas, but Texas used to be part of Mexico. It was part of I guess they got annexed and then they were just here, so they're American. But the community was all like Mexican. They didn't speak any English there. And, we're talking about the 1920s, so like over 100 years ago or something. So, my mom, who's, the biggest influence in my life, I think was the main reason why I decided that I wanted to teach English to beginners because that's, you know, and later on, I mean, just to know that she had that book and she would tell everybody, look, my son wrote this book and blah, 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 blah. And even my father too. It just, that made it all worth it to me. Like,
that's
I
really
know that
cool.
knowing that, and like, there's this picture that I have somewhere of this student, right? And she had my book and she was holding it like this close to her chest. She's like, I love this book, Mr. Torres. I love this book. And we all, so let me see. So we're looking through her book, but she had so much stuff written all over it. Like she took notes, she annotated this thing from cover to cover. It was bizarre. But like, I love it's like things like that make it worth it for me because you can't put a price on that.
Yeah, yeah. So
You know what I
you're,
mean?
wait, I also want to like, okay, I'm loving this story, but I'm also clarifying that like the book on Amazon is not just a teacher copy. Like your student was reading it and using it as well.
Yes, and the reason when I came out with the second edition,
Oh,
okay, the second edition is way different because remember COVID hit. So when COVID hit, we moved into a virtual world. We moved into virtual learning. And so a lot of my students were like, okay, well, we can't go to class. I can't see you. We can't sit together. What can we do? And from that spawned the idea, so well, I have to figure out how to fix the first edition and make it so it's usable in today's virtual world. And so like many of these lessons from cover to cover have QR codes, right? So the students can use their phone, use the QR codes with those activities and practice their pronunciation. They can practice the vocabulary. I mean, all those things like diagrams and things that they need practice with the TH sounds. You know how they can't do the
that's
TH sounds like a
cool.
finger. And so like they have to, and they can just at their leisure when they have convenience because they work. Even the high school students work. So like they're like busy. And
So when
this
you do the QR code, like where does that route you to? How did you craft that?
So I that was a thing like for me in the first book, we have all the audio on like it's like I think it's on Podbean, right? So every audio is on the Podbean. So they literally have to. So initially we would have an app, and so the students
Okay.
would have the app, and then they could just scroll to the activity number, hit that activity number, and they would be able to listen to the activity. But it was only audio.
Did you create that whole app as well, or did you create a program that goes onto an
No,
already created app?
Podbean already had an app. I just had them download their app and then they would subscribe to my channel.
And you're
and then
saying Podbean,
pod,
P-O-D-B.
yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
bean, pod bean.
I've not heard of this. Okay. Okay, cool.
So they had that app. So I didn't have to create the app. The app was already there. So
Yeah.
that was the first one, but I said now we have to take it to another level where, YouTube, I can post these on YouTube and give them visual cues as well as audio. So that's where the real difference is between the first edition and the second edition. A lot of people still buy that first edition, and you can still access everything. It's all there. But I think the new edition, the second edition, is more geared to now, where people are just on the go. They just, we're working on this lesson. When you go home, practice. You have the QR code right there in your book. Go ahead and, snap it with your camera and go right to it and practice. And then,
This is
yeah,
cool.
it
Also,
works.
like
It
with
works.
yeah, with COVID, like with masks, right? They were talking about how a lot of like, well, with masks and phones, I think, well, that's a whole nother conversation. I think phones were more detrimental than
Yeah.
COVID. Um, but with the masks and phones, that a lot of younger generations don't know like facial cues. But
Yeah.
when you're trying to learn English, they were finding, right? Like during COVID, it was very difficult for students to see our mouths and how they move, right? Like when we're looking at like I'm trying to learn some French words because I'm going to Paris this summer. So
Nice.
like my mouth is more pouty, right? And so I'm trying to explain to my students like, ooh, it is romantic, but then in English like mouth, it's very stiff, right? Like it's
Yeah.
very interesting how we transfer. And there were clear masks and what have you, but having that QR code is phenomenal. Like what a great idea.
Yeah, it works, man. It works, and they're all over. So, and
Yeah.
now check this out. So, what I'm working on now, because I can't stay stagnant for anything.
Okay. Yeah.
The new one that I'm doing is totally focused on writing. Okay,
So this is a whole new book. This isn't an
whole
updated
new
book.
book.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Whole new book. It's a
Okay.
book called Writing Journey for Beginners. Right?
Oh.
So there's a
Okay.
ton of stuff out there for intermediate and advanced. So there's hardly anything out there for the low beginners, for the beginners, right?
Yeah. Facts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I said, same concept. You have QR codes, where I take them through a step by step with the writing process, right? And I give them examples, and it's all like but I built in entertainment into this one, unlike the other one, because I find that as I'm getting older and as the students their attention spans get quicker, they need to have some kind of element of entertainment to keep them engaged, right? And so
Okay.
go
But
ahead.
here's what I love about what you're saying. So I do a lot of like project-based learning. My students make films, commercials, podcasts, what have you, right? And I hear some teachers saying like, well, now they always want to be entertained. Yeah, sometimes we have to pay the bills.
Yeah,
However, I feel like the youth is also helping us understand that like life is supposed to be fun and
yeah,
joyous. And even though they're pushing back on certain things, they're also like a beautiful disruptor in a way to help us and re-engage and recraft. Like throw out the worksheet. Who gives a shit? Like move on. Like, but it's
fact.
important because like okay, so I worked it with like foundation students, right? So I had like new beginners, and then I had EL 1, 2, 3, whatever. There was all mixed into one class. And then I
Mhm.
also had students who were like born in America, but their English is struggling, but they're not interested in school. They hate it. They're bored out of their minds, right? But they're all in one class.
Yeah,
So the American public probably doesn't fully understand this, grasp the fact that like I'm introducing these sweet. I mean, I've worked at 5 different schools, public, charter, private, whatever, Colorado, California. Newcomers are so sweet. They want to learn. They love it. And then I've got them in the same room with a kid who thinks school is terrible. It's not a good idea to broach those two in the same
yeah,
room together. And then also like you're talking about like these newcomers, they need to learn like the basics of sound in order to move their mouth differently.
yeah.
I've got a current student who's moved here from Yemen this year. She speaks Arabic. I'm at a 98% Latino school. She's
Mm.
got nobody, right? Like,
And she got
so
that for sure.
she's on an island. So I use like Google Translate, and
Mhm.
we talk to each other. And then the other classmates, I have them use Google Translate with her. But I really try to make sure, and I saw this in your in one of your YouTube videos,
Mhm.
that you're trying to make sure that they laugh. Because I remember when I moved to Australia, no one around me, there was only one other American at the college with me, right? And like your humor is gone. And
Yeah,
so like a part of your soul is like, I don't really feel right. Like I'm not laughing. I'm not like, I need
yeah,
to relax a little bit, right?
yep.
And moving to another country is a lot of work. Man, like when I went to like San Jose del Cabo 2 years ago, uh, by noon, just like a student, my brain was tired. I'm walking around talking in Spanish, trying to remember pesos, and like by noon, my brain shot. Like I'm done. I want to go lay on the beach and like
Yeah,
laugh and talk to
yeah,
myself in English. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So like we forget that, and it's so impactful. So for you to be like giving visual cues and making sure that it's entertaining, like we do need to entertain. Like we're salesmen in a sense, but also like if the learning isn't fun, it also doesn't sit into our minds as well. Like I can
Yes.
feel when the room's not fun, you know?
And yeah, and this is early on in the first book, in the first edition. That I were always like these little. You could tell that you could tell I'm satirical because some of the things that I included in there is clearly like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like examples about the true and false, for example.
Mm.
And it's always got a chuckle out of my students about whether or not a horse can climb a tree or if a dog can fly. And they have
Yeah.
to say whether it's true or false, and it always gets a chuckle out of them. It always gets, or like hot sauce, boy, hot sauce, what that does to my stomach. And so like students engage with that because it's so, it's chunk, it's digestible at their level. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
digest it at their level because they're just trying to grasp what's going on around them. So you
Yeah.
fast forward that to now, and it's like with these younger kids, even though they're coming from like El Salvador or Mexico, wherever they're coming from. Like I'll give you a real quick
Yeah.
story. This because I'm still piecing together the videos as we're doing this, you and I.
Oh,
Piece this past week, and so like I'm bringing them to class, right? I'm showing them to my students because I want to make sure it works first. I'm not just gonna put stuff out there and be like, oh, man, this guy clearly didn't check his. No, all of my stuff is being tested. Not just
well,
by other teachers.
and I think too, like as a teacher, to um, put our egos to the side. I always ask my students while I'm teaching, in the middle of teaching, and then after a unit is done, how did that go for you? Are you bored? Did I drill and kill you too long on that? Or how did that feel? And like, what would you revise if I teach this next year? Like, we are co-creating. Like, they are a part of it with me. I'm not the boss. Like, that does not work.
And it's so like weird like for me because my students know as soon as they hear the first word they know it's me. They're like, oh, that's you, Mr. Torres. And so like we're doing this other girl's really, really shy. And you always have those in the class, right? There's always those that just never want to say anything.
Well, and sometimes they're worried because they want to say it perfectly, but if I
Yeah,
don't try and attempt, I'm not going to get to the perfection. But like, I mean, not perfection, but right? They're too
yeah,
shy to speak, and then it's like, no, no, you have to start speaking.
yeah. And so like this one girl who was completely the most shy of all shy, and we're going through the video, and I'm kind of I have these points in the video where you have to pause, right? And so like one where so when you pause and when we come back, we're gonna see if you got it right. We're doing the whole writing piece now, right?
Okay.
And this girl, I'm telling you, it was the most entertaining thing for me. Like when we would hit play again, and it reveals what the answer is, and this girl would just like almost jump out of her chair, like, "All right, I got it right, I got it." And like this is like the shyest kid ever. You never hear her peep, and she's like bouncing off the chair. That's how I know that the content I'm producing is good, because when students who normally would never interact with anything is all of a sudden like they're all excited, they can't wait for the next one.
Yeah.
I know I'm hitting it right.
Yep. Yeah, I totally agree. I had a student, we were doing our ingredient research project, and she hadn't turned in much all year, wasn't interested in much. And she wrote to a company telling them to change the ingredients of the food. And when they wrote back, she was like, hey, they just said that they are following the FDA regulations, but I know that Australia and Europe have better regulations. I want to write back. And I was like, you want to do what? I'm winning, right? You're winning at that
Really?
point. Yeah, when they
That's
want to
awesome.
do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this book too, what are you noticing about like the writing aspect with newcomers? What do they need as far as support to write?
So essentially, it's all about making small gains. Okay.
Hmm.
the thing is, and I work with a number of the teachers about this, and I do consult with other teachers because I don't want to be completely, because I know there are people that are way better at certain things than I am, and I'm like you were talking about ego. I checked that out a long time ago when I'm doing this work, because the last thing I want is for my own ego to trip up what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Let me hear what everybody has to say. And so here's the thing, like all the standardized curriculums, everything that the district gives us, okay, we already know that it's above their heads. They're not going to get to it. They're just not. Come on, let's just say it. All right, these kids are just not ready for that yet because they're still trying to figure out, their ABCs sometimes. Seriously.
Well, my student who only speaks Arabic, she's in my 7th grade English class. She can't access anything in my room, really, for the first 3 months because of government budget cuts. We don't have our EL1s in a class together, right? Like, she is in an ELD class, but that's with mixed levels, but she's not with ones learning English. Like, she doesn't need to read the short story we're reading in class. She needs to learn from you first, right?
Right. So there are all these. We know that there's all these hurdles that we have to go through,
Yeah.
and that only complicates things with the students. But here's the bottom line: is they need to show that they're understanding, and the only way you can do that is if you start at the beginning. Okay, so I can't start all the way back at ABC. Especially now in March, So I give them, okay, let's start with capitalization. What needs to be capitalized? I mean, if we can tackle that, then we're at least getting to the nuts and bolts, right? The mechanics.
Yeah.
Let's not just capitalize and don't capitalize every single word. What words strategically? I'm going to give you a sentence. All right, we'll start with the short ones, and then we'll grow them, and then there'll be longer sentences. Now you have to identify which words in the sentence needs to be capitalized. That it has to be a city, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's how you start. That's what I start with doing with these. Okay.
But how do you make it entertaining? Like, how are you saying? Like, how do I zhuzh it up?
Well, I mean, and at least for the sake of the video, okay. There's music, there's visuals, there's imagery there for them to be engaged in it, right? It's like if it's like because you got to take this to the next level, Tess.
We're seeing that in podcasting as well, right? People are starting to layer pictures in and whatnot. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not suggesting that people should, turn out like Jay Leno or something and show up and at a monologue at the beginning of class. I'm not suggesting that, but there has to be some level of humor.
Mm-hmm.
You have to come in with some humor, otherwise the kids are going to just tune out. Nothing will engage a kid more than if they think that they're going to get something there where they're going to be able to chuckle and kind of relax, like you were saying earlier about just kind of relax a little bit.
I think
nothing relaxes more than that.
One of your videos you watched last night, you were talking about how you turn around, you're not facing the students, and you ask them, spell your name, and you're going to write their name.
Exactly.
And so if they were saying Maria and then M and then E and then they see you write the E and then they I mean A. So I think also that it's humorous when we make the mistake, right? Because when I was in Australia for several weeks, people were telling me other college kids were telling me do you want to go to the beach with us? Do you want to come to dinner with us? And I would say, oh yeah, I'm game. I'll go. I'm game. So 3 weeks later, they were like, Tess, we want you to think well about yourself. You're a good person. You need to be more kind to yourself. And I go, I don't know what you're talking about. And they were like, well, in Australia, game means lame. And you keep telling us, you want to go to dinner with us. Well, I'm stupid. I guess I'll go. And then we could laugh about it, right? But that's the part of coming together when we're learning another language and laugh about the mistake and understand that it's funny when two worlds collide, right?
The example you gave is the perfect example about spelling your name, and they always flub it. They always mess it up, and it always gets a big laugh, right? And it's lighthearted where nobody feels like I'm picking on you. It doesn't feel like or bullying you or anything like that. It's purely lighthearted. It's pure.